On 10th of June 2012, shock engulfed the nation of Kenya. The man in whose hands Kenya's internal security lay was no more.
He had many enemies from different quarters.
Professor George Saitoti, his assistant Orwa Ojode, two of their bodyguards and two pilots had perished in an early morning crash above Kibiku Forest in Ngong. 10 years later, the 6 deaths have joined a long list of Kenya's public mysteries with no resolution in sight. Did Saitoti die in a normal plane crash, or was there foul play?
I've not heard, even those who were speculators, coming up with any alternative theories. So I would want to believe it was an accident.
It is incredibly strange that the person who is heading in charge of your national security would die in such a manner, and there's no conclusive, answer that's given to rebut any rumors, to clarify any suspicions, to iron out all of these things, even only for the families of the 6 people who are on that helicopter.
For more than a decade, there were 2 renowned professors at the helm of Kenya's leadership. Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi himself, the self-declared professor of politics, and his vice president, George Saitoti, a true professor of mathematics. Professor Saitoti was appointed finance minister after the 1983 election, taking over from Mwai Kibaki, who was transferred to Home Affairs. Saitoti rose through the ranks to become Moi's principal assistant for a straight 13 years, making him the longest-serving second in command until his acrimonious fallout with Moi in the run-up to the historic 2002 general election, when the late President Moi baffled friend and foe by handpicking Uhuru Kenyatta as his preferred successor.
Huyu makamu wa rais ni rafiki, lakini urafiki, sikieni, urafiki ni tofauti. Yule ambaye anaweza kuendesha kupeleka kama vile mimi ningependelea wananchi kuongozwa ni Uhuru Kenyatta.
A calculating and by some accounts paranoid politician, Saitoti was for most of those years the perfect vice president, never showing any overt ambitions for the top job, never overshadowing his boss until the 18th of March 2002, when Raila Odinga's National Development Party NDP merged with KANU at a colorful ceremony at the famous Kasarani Sports Complex. Saitoti, who realized he would not be occupying any of the 4 vice chairman slots, appeared to differ with his boss in public. That day would be remembered for one of Saitoti's most enduring statements.
There come a time when the nation is more important than an individual. It is because of that consideration and in consultation that I say I shall not offer myself for any position. I can see many of my supporters are unhappy, but you'll prove me right in the future. Asante.
Emboldened by Raila's public protest against Moi's choice, Saitoti would join the breakaway KANU faction, dealing the grand old party a near-death blow. KANU had no chance against the resulting opposition juggernaut, the National Rainbow Coalition, NAC. In the ensuing NAC administration, Saitoti appeared poised for greater things. But on 3rd of February 2006, a report by the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the Goldenberg saga recommended that criminal charges be preferred against the former Vice President Saitoti for his involvement in the scandal. 10 days later, the Vice President resigned from his ministerial position, paving way for extensive investigations into the allegations. On 31st July 2006, 5 months later, a 3-judge bench would issue an order that cleared Saitoti of any wrongdoing, expunged his name from the commission's report, and put in place a permanent stay of prosecution against him. By the time of his death, Saitoti had fronted himself for the presidency, with a somewhat mixed heritage of both the Mount Kenya region and Maasai land. He was arguably the man with the power and money to succeed President Kibaki, and those in PNU at the time say all was ready for the journey ahead.
Nataka niwaambie wale ambao hamkusikia ama wamesahau, mimi nimeshatangaza tayari mahali popote ambao mimi ninatembea kwamba nitasimama kiti cha rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya.
But on the 10th of June 2012, the aircraft 5Y-CDT AS-350 dropped from the skies into Kibiku Forest in Ngong. Minutes later, amateur footage from the first eyewitnesses showed the scene of a terrible accident. The mangled fuselage of a small aircraft, the bodies on board charred, most of them beyond recognition. But there was going to be more. News flashes on mainstream media had by now confirmed the identity of the mangled bodies on the horror scene. On board the ill-fated plane were Kenya's Security Minister George Saitoti, his assistant Joshua Orwa Ojode, their bodyguards Joshua Tonkei and Thomas Morimi. Also on board had been Luke Oyugi and his co-pilot Nancy Gitwanja, all of them killed in the crash. Residents watched in disbelief. At the time, Amos Kimunya was the Minister for Transport, and naturally, he would receive briefs of any accidents that had taken place. And he thought that this was just another of the usual crashes. It was not.
The guy in charge of aircraft accidents then called me and said, well, we've had a small issue, a big issue. We had an aircraft crash and VVIP. So it didn't occur to me, that we'll be talking the same person we just talked with, and now they have gone to the airport and taken off. And so he said, so what has happened? Who is involved? And when he told me, I told my wife, Prof, because when I told her, now I'm not going to Thiwa, right? I was ready to go. Then said, after we just talked, they've just been involved in an accident, and it's like, it's fatal.
The Kipipiri MP says he was shaken by the news, not just because he had lost a friend, but because he could have been a part of the 8:30 a.m. tragedy.
Indeed, on the material day when he passed away, we were supposed to be together in Ojode's place, Dhiwa, for a fundraiser, and then move to, I think, Kericho to do some party affairs. So when we left Mombasa, because that's the last function he really had, by the time we left Mombasa, we had agreed we were going to meet at Wilson Airport, get on the chopper together, and go to Thiwa. But as fate would have it, the late Ojode did not travel on Saturday to wait for us in Thiwa. So Prof then called me in the morning and said, we can't travel together because Honorable Ojode did not go yesterday, so I'm giving a lift. And since we are only 4, the chopper can take only 4 people, he's calling me to agree to give my space to Ojode. So, and I did that.
Within a month, Kimunya would quickly gazette a team to investigate the accident. That team would later be degazetted.
it's something that touched me, directly. In that, I was supposed to be part of that delegation. That's how has happened. I'm the Minister for Transport. So the next thing is obviously we have to start the investigation in terms of what happened. And I gazetted the team. And now because of him being a cabinet minister, the matter had now to be taken a notch higher to a presidential commission of inquiry. And also there was lots of issues. So we then ended up now de-gazetting and gazetting again for the commission of inquiry, now by the president and not by the Minister for Transport.
By commissioning an inquiry so quickly, the government was caving in to pressure to answer difficult questions about what really had led to the deadly crash in Kibeko. But why was this accident of such importance to the public? Investigative journalist John Alan Namu, who covered the story, was among the very few journalists asking the hard questions about the crash. He followed the trail all the way to South Africa.
He had been surprisingly open about the findings of a report that was submitted, I think, by the then U.S. Ambassador Michael Rannenberger, about specific members of parliament who are suspected to be involved in the drug game. Just a few years earlier, Kenya had seized one of its biggest hauls of cocaine. So there was certainly a lot of interest around George Saitoti as a person, enough for there to warrant an inquiry.
Saitoti lived a reclusive lifestyle, feared a lot for his life. Just 2 decades earlier, he had escaped what was seen as a calculated murder attempt in the wake of the mysterious murder of the then high-flying Foreign Affairs Minister, Dr. Robert Ouko, in 1990. The Commission of Inquiry put in place at the time
Honorable Lady Justice
was chaired by top judge Kalpana Rawal, later to become Deputy Chief Justice. The Rawal Commission did little to unlock the mystery behind the death of Saitoti, Ojode, Oyugi, Gitwanja, Tonkei and Moremi, but instead exposed the country to numerous serious questions and outright gaps in the investigation. A reconstruction of the journey from Wilson Airport to Ndhiwa shows the aircraft under the command of Luke Oyugi and Nancy Gitwanja took exactly 10 minutes from the time of takeoff to the time it hit the ground in Kibeko Forest. The pilots were in communication with the command center at Wilson Airport for the first 6 minutes. The plane then left the Wilson Airport airspace that minute, and strangely, its tracker shows that it turned back towards Wilson and steadily descended to the ground in a record 3 minutes, killing everyone on board. There was no evidence that pilots made any effort to control the plane. Neither did they raise any alarm over the state of the flight, even though the communication channels were operational, giving rise to opinions that the pilots may have been long dead by the time of the crash. The Commission of Inquiry was tasked with establishing what happened in those 180 seconds. It was here that the Commission heard that indeed Saitoti was poisoned.
I, Dr. Amritpal Khalsi.
The stunning revelation sharply contradicted an official report by the government chemist that the minister's blood and tissue analysis indicated no poisoning. Dr. Dorothy Njeru and Dr. Amritpal Kaur Khalsi told the sitting that Saitoti's body indicated significant levels of carbon monoxide poisoning. This was evidenced by a cherry-pink discoloration of the tissues.
With a background of a body that is significantly involved in burn injuries, then the bright red discoloration is suggestive of carbon monoxide poisoning or inhalation.
Yes. So that's with the additional observations that you did when you observed in your participation, which are not captured in the report.
Yes, Your Honor.
The two forensic experts outrightly disowned a previous post-mortem report that had been presented to the commission by Dr. Johansen Oduor, even though they formed part of the team that performed the 6-hour exercise. Johansen made no mention of carbon monoxide poisoning. In fact, his report showed that the cause of death for the 6 was multiple injuries and burns due to aviation accident. And then there was something else. Dr. Johansen Oduor was dishing special instructions.
Yesterday you mentioned about calls you received the day after post-mortem. You remember that discussion?
Yes.
Would you want to share with us those calls and the concern by the callers?
I was only called by our senior-most colleague, Dr. Johansen Oduor, and he mentioned that we were not supposed to divulge any information, including photographs or the notes, or tell anybody about anything, and he had been given this information by NSIS. Apart from Dr. Oduor not indicating the poisoning, the role of the National Intelligence Agency also came into sharp focus.
The National Security Intelligence Services, being the main intelligence body in this country, would be interested in that kind of information. So it would be important that they know and they understand. I think there might have been, just thinking and reflecting back, there might have been some pressure to ensure that there was a tight lid on the kind of information that was coming out of the autopsy, so as to stem the very steady flow of rumors that surrounded the death of George Saitoti. But the very fact that there were so many gaping holes in the story and so many questions made that bit of information even more important to sort of pay attention to, right? Because in the final analysis of things, yes, Dr. Johansen was told not to disclose things, not to disclose to other people, and he told his juniors. But then why omit certain very crucial bits of information that would have helped in the autopsy?
A report by an official from the government chemist, Joyce Wairimu Njoya, presented to the commission in 2012, indicated that the 3 samples submitted for testing only Luke Oyugi had carbon monoxide poisoning, but his co-pilot Nancy Gitwanja and Saitoti returned negative results. It has always begged the question on what really was the cause of the odorless and colorless gas carbon monoxide if Nancy Gitwanja did not inhale it at all. But Luke Oyugi's was at 68% concentration, yet they both sat in the same cockpit. It has also never been said why the bodies of Ojode, Tonkei and Moremi were not tested, forming 2 of the most serious loopholes in the investigation.
And then third was the switching of the manifest of the people who were supposed to be flying that helicopter on the day. So those were the 3 things around the flight itself.
On the morning that the accident happened, it was supposed to be Air Wing Commandant Mbithi flying the security minister. But that plan was quickly changed, and Luke Oyugi and Nancy Gitwanja were hurriedly recalled to work. Then there was the issue of George Saitoti's Nokia E63 mobile phone. The small device had survived the crash and found itself in the hands of a police officer, Constable Evans Kiprotich. For about a month, Saitoti's mobile phone, though in the hands of a police officer, made and received a total of 42 phone calls. Strangely but material was that 31 of those calls were to the same number. The public has never been made aware who that person was and what information they wanted from Saitoti's handset after his death. And 10 years on, there are still no answers about what really happened the morning that the 6 were killed in the crash. But Amos Kimunya, the then transport minister, believes there is nothing left to tell.
Let's just say at times we look at things from, when it's your time, it's your time. Yeah, it could have been a car, it could have been an aircraft, it could have been people have been known to sleep and not wake up. So I kind of at times believe it's like when is your time to go? That's it. When it's not your time, I mean, I could have been in another aircraft. But because God had said it's not your time yet, so created a situation where Ojode could not fly the day before, and hence we needed to agree who takes the space, the seat. Is it him or me? Again, all these are God's workings.
No. The death of George Saitoti was never an accident. And you could tell from the activities that followed after his death. The pathologists didn't agree. There was a bit of cover-up. The commission of inquiry that was set up, you could look at the membership. External investigators like FBI and Scotland Yard were not involved. So the same people who, in my opinion, participated in the death of George Saitoti, in my opinion, also participated in the cover-up, just like that one of Robert Uko.
In my view, it definitely wasn't just another accident. Look, it is incredibly strange that the person who is heading in charge of your national security would die in such a manner, and there's no conclusive, answer that's given to rebut any rumors, to clarify any suspicions, to iron out all of these things, even only for the families of the 6 people who are on that helicopter. Why is this still an open question? That's what bothers me.
But many theories remain fully untested. A few years earlier, Kenya had seized its largest cocaine haul, and just before his death, Saitoti had promised the National Assembly to name drug lords in the country and give evidence within 10 days. It was within those 10 days that they dropped from the skies dead. To date, there has been no determination whether this was mere coincidence or not.
So there are many, many political assassinations in our country that took place since independence that up to now they have not been unraveled. So I think it was very sad. I mean, from the outset, and I'm sure you, the media, were there, so the death of George Saitoti was not an accident.
Then what it does is that it erodes trust in all of these institutions that were handling various aspects of the investigation, right? There's a police, of course. There's the government pathologist. And there's other, agencies that were very interested in finding out what happened. That there's no conclusive answer really begs the question about why there's no conclusive answer. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying.
Yeah? The fact that there's no answer is an answer in itself about how we do things in this country.
There's also the theory that Saitoti was a front-runner in the presidential election and that these two could have earned him any number of enemies across the political landscape. But just like the mystery around the narcotics list, this political angle too has never been probed and laid to rest. Still, Saitoti remains one of the household names in Kenyan politics 10 years after his demise.
The other thing that I also realized later on is my first car, which I bought when I was in second year at the university. It was a Citroën, KPA 828. Now, the first owner of that car was Professor Saitoti. Then he sold it to some chap who then, sold it. He couldn't cope with it and sold it to me. I bought it and then remodeled it and did it. A student feeling hot.
10 years on, the story remains the same. Professor George Saitoti stands as one among the many prominent Kenyans whose mysterious deaths remain unresolved but never forgotten. with the numerous begging questions that fed into the distance with each passing day. Brian Obuya, NTV.